Happy, happy Halloween, Halloween, Halloween. Happy, happy Halloween, Silver Shamrock. Happy, happy Halloween, Halloween, Halloween. Happy, happy Halloween, Silver Shamrock.
It's 7th Street Productions' 31 Days of Halloween.
Greetings, Earthlings, and welcome back to 7th Street, and welcome back to 7th Street Productions' 31 Days of Halloween, where we are counting down my personal favorite 31 horror films of all time. And it's 1 week till Halloween, so I hope everyone's really excited now. And we're coming in on our last Universal horror film, my personal favorite Universal horror film, directed by the late, great James Whale's Bride of Frankenstein. Yes, this is one of the rare occasions where a sequel is totally superior to the original. The movie starts off on a weird note, too. It starts off with Mary Shelley in a group of her friends, and it's like she just finished telling the story of Frankenstein. And all of her friends are like, "Oh, that was scary. Why don't you tell us what happens next?" And she goes, "Oh, okay, I will." And then the movie picks up exactly where Frankenstein ended. It's just really interesting because the first Frankenstein movie didn't have Mary Shelley in it at all. The only reason I think that they did that was because they needed to recap a movie. You know, back in those days there wasn't television or you couldn't go to the movie rental store, you know, so if someone didn't see Frankenstein, well, you gotta inform them as to what happened. It's really interesting. It's kind of something that you only see in television nowadays. But anyway, spoiler alert, Frankenstein isn't dead, and he continues to go on a rampage through the countryside with the townsfolk chasing him, and at one point they end up capturing him and tying him to these like 2x4s, like in a cross position, and it kind of invokes like weird religious symbols. I don't know if that's what they were going for, but that's definitely what it seems like to me. Anyhow, the monster ends up escaping and going on the lam and staying with an old blind hermit who, you know, thinks of him as a real person. And this is the first time that, you know, you get that sort of iconic Frankenstein, you know, the friend Frankenstein. You know, he actually talks in this one. He never did that in the first one. By the way, yes, I know that the monster is not named Frankenstein. The doctor is Frankenstein, but just for the sake of doing this video, he's fucking Frankenstein. So anyway, across town, Dr. Frankenstein and his wife are finally getting on with their lives. They think that the horror is done with until Dr. Pretorius enters the picture, who has got to be my second favorite horror villain of all time. He's got these great lines in the movie, like, everything is his weakness. He drinks gin all the time, and he says, "Oh, gin, it's my only weakness." He smokes cigars and says, "Cigars, they're my only weakness." He's this really diabolical character who, it just so happens, is also studying on how to create life. Except for he makes like these little miniature people inside of bottles. And he goes to Dr. Frankenstein because obviously he must have heard all the commotion with you know, the monster terrorizing the village, and he blackmails Dr. Frankenstein into helping him create the monster a mate. So enter the bride. The bride doesn't actually enter the film until the last few moments, and she really doesn't have anything to do. She just kind of like hisses like a cat and looks around like a bird, and then the monster utters his most famous line, "We belong dead," and destroys him and his mate. This is a really beautiful film, and I always kicked myself for waiting so long to see it. I was always a really big fan of the classic monster movies, but when it came to Frankenstein films, I always preferred the Hammer Frankenstein films. And it wasn't until probably my late teens that I started really getting interested in Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, Ghost of Frankenstein, all of the Universal classic Frankenstein films. And I had realized by the time I was 17 that I had put off seeing Bride of Frankenstein for so long. And when I finally watched it, I was absolutely in love with it. I think I even watched it for a second time that same day. It's a breeze to get through. All of these older films are really short. So if you haven't seen them, I definitely recommend binging all of the classic Universal Frankenstein films. I guarantee that you'll love them just as much as I do. So, yeah, I would say this is definitely a must-watch for any horror fan.